Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of The Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to spend some time with me on the video. And we're going to have a good jig video for y'all today. What I want to do in today's episode is I want to talk about things that you can do with the jig that helps trigger the bass into biting it and gets the fish interested in it and actually gets the bass to commit to biting the jig. Because one thing about jig fishing, guys, is any lure that you have on the bottom, where that lure is on the bottom, those fish study those things. They just don't run down there and grab it as soon as they see it. They'll go down there and they'll look at a jig laying on the bottom or a Texas rig, and they analyze it and they study it a lot of times before they actually make a commitment to bite it. So I got some tips that'll get you guys to, get you a lot more bites than what you normally had, because a lot of people I talk to about jig fishing, they struggle with it. They can catch fish on Texas rig worms and creature baits, but when it comes to jigs, they have a hard time. So I got some good info for y'all today. Also, guys, today we will be talking about my Blaukat throwback jig that I designed for Cumberland Pro Lures. I will link this in my Tackle Warehouse link. If you guys would like to pick you some up, you can get them through that link there. Much appreciated. And also, guys, I'd like to invite everybody to please consider hitting that subscribe button here to The Fishing Teacher. We're working hard to get to 20,000 subscribers, and with your help, maybe we can do that here over the next few months. So much appreciated there. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what you can do to actually trigger a bite with for jigs. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is color and rate of fall. The rate of fall on a jig, as far as the head size that you use on it, has a lot to do with the metabolism and the activity, the aggressiveness or the non-aggressiveness of the bass. And generally, just as just a broad rule of thumb that you can sort of like use as a starting point, but normally the dirtier the water, what I have found in my jig fishing, the lighter the jig, size that I like to use, and the clearer the water, the faster. Because when you're fishing a jig in clear water, you're wanting that bait to get on the bottom as quick as you can, and they don't hit it on the way down. Fish in clear water, they hit it on the bottom. But in the dirtier water, since they don't have the sight, they don't have the visual ability to see that jig falling, you want a little bit lighter jig, because it gives those fish more time to feel that water vibration and the water displacement of that jig falling. So that's the general rule of thumb that I use. And most of the time, if I'm fishing water visibility or water depth, and that is less than 2 foot deep, I'm using a 3/8 ounce jig, and a little bit deeper I go heavier. And the same with the water clarity. If I'm fishing water clarity that is like under 2 foot in clarity, a lot of times lighter jig, cleaner water, heavier jig. That's a good thing to remember with that. Colors are another thing important with that. One of the things you'll find out with colors, it has, again, a lot to do with the water clarity, time of the year. There are certain colors that the bass bite better at different times of the year in correlation with the water clarity. Most of the time when I'm fishing water visibility that is greater than 3 foot, I use some type of a brown jig, brown or green, if the water visibility is over 3 feet. And if the water visibility is like under 3 feet or under 2 feet, the black and chartreuse and a black and blue is going to be really good. And we make 6 different colors in my throwback jig here, guys, so it's good to have a little bit of everything on there for those different conditions. But the combination of the fall rate of your jig and the color, that has a lot to do with triggering the bite on it. It's like getting those fish to react to the fall and different color, combinations is a big factor, in getting bites or not. Now, I've experimented a lot in jig fishing, and sometimes it's like you think they're not even biting a jig until you put on the right color, and then you can just light them up with it. Let me give you guys a prime example of what I'm talking about. I was fishing a tournament at Lake of the Ozarks last year, and I was pretty much committed to catching them flipping a jig around shallow cover, shallow wood, docks, whatever, that type of thing. And I tried a lot of different colors, and I really felt that the color that they would want would be a black and blue or a black and chartreuse, because it was pretty dirty water. And I experimented and didn't have any bites on it. And then I put on a green and chartreuse and started catching fish, and started catching a lot of fish on it. And even though the water visibility was a little bit dirty, I thought, for green, that little bit of chartreuse in there, along with the bright skies that gave more sunlight penetration in the water, it just created the look that the fish wanted. So another thing you can do is experiment with colors, because the colors that they want change all the time. It changes from the color they want at 8 o'clock in the morning might be different than 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because that light intensity in the water and the light penetration in the water is different at different times of the day. So sometimes they prefer a different color. Other things like wind and water visibility, all that type of stuff comes into play. So never forget to experiment with colors. Now the next thing, and this is one of the most important ones too, let's talk a little bit about how you want to work a jig to trigger a strike. Now most of the time when I'm fishing a jig, I'm pitching or flipping that jig for the most part. So I got a new rod with the tag on, sorry about that. But I'm usually pitching and flipping that jig. I'm not really casting it. I like to pitch and flip it because I can pitch and flip effectively, for maybe 30 or 40 feet, so I can get it way out there. And when you pitch that jig out there, I don't care if you're flipping it or pitching it, make sure that that jig falls on a slack line. You don't want to like flip it out there and let that jig fall on a tight line and have it pendulum back there. It doesn't come as natural. Pitch the jig out there, put your rod tip high, and and feed it down as it goes down, where that jig will fall straight down. And there's something about that vertical drop on a jig that really, really helps you get more bites on there. That's number one. The next thing to do with the jig, now we're talking about a full-size jig, like my throwback jig here, is you don't want to drag it on the bottom and make short hops. Now this is something that you do more with a football head jig, something like that. But on a pitching and flipping jig or a casting jig, something like this, you want to hop it off the bottom, probably anywhere between 6 inches to 2 foot. So I'll pitch it out there like that, and then I just sort of hop it off the bottom like that. Let it go back down, hop it off the bottom, hop it off the bottom. So when that jig falls on a slack line straight down, I'm hopping it off the bottom, letting it come back, pulling it off the bottom like that, let it come back. Now what this does, when that jig's laying on the bottom like that fish is nosing down on that jig and he's studying that jig, all of a sudden, if that jig pops up like that fast, that creates a reaction strike. And that fish it's got to make an instant decision. It's like, are they going to grab it or not? And a lot of times when you hop it fast like that, you trigger that instinct and they come up and get it. They either get it on the way up or they get it as it's falling back down. So the strike normally has, like I'm working like this, I'll pop it up like that. And when I get it to the high point, that's when I feel the resistance and set the hook. And other times it's when I'm letting it fall back down. You see your line tick and they've got it with that. So main thing to remember with that full-size jig, guys, is hop it at least a foot off the bottom. That makes a big difference. I don't care if you're flipping inside of a tree or if you're flipping next to a stump or whatever. Hop that jig high off the bottom. You're going to get a lot more bites with it for sure. And another thing with it, guys, is use heavier line. It's like, I don't know what it is about it, but when I'm flipping and pitching a full-size jig, I'm using 20 to 25 pound test Seaguard and BizX fluorocarbon. I do not use braid. The only time that I'll ever use braid on a jig is if I'm fishing it in thick matted vegetation. But for any other situation, most of the time I'm using the fluorocarbon line. It just gets you a lot more bites. They can't see it as good. But that's the main thing, guys, is work your jig a little bit more aggressively, experiment with colors and wait on it until you really dial in what they want. And that's a big factor in actually triggering those fish to bite a jig versus just having them look at it. So hope it helps out. We'll talk later.